Welcome to another episode of Progress, Potential, and Possibilities, discussions with fascinating people designing a better tomorrow for all of us. I'm your host, Ira Pastor.
Welcome, everybody, again to another episode of our show, bringing you another really fascinating guest today, helping to create a better tomorrow on some very unique fronts. Today, we have the honor of being joined by Dr. Svitlana Volkova, who is Chief Scientist in Decision Intelligence and Analytics, part of the National Security Directorate at the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. And PNNL is one of the United States Department of Energy's national laboratories. It's managed by the DOE Office of Sciences. And Dr. Volkova is a recognized leader in the field of computational social science and computational linguistics. And her contributions in science and her publication profile cover a really broad range of topics on applied machine learning, deep learning, natural language processing, and social media analytics. Dr. Volkova's research focuses on understanding, predicting, and explaining human behavior, interactions, and real-world events from open-source social data, and her approaches help advance the affection decision-making and reasoning about extreme volumes of dynamic, multilingual, multimodal, and diverse real-world unstructured data. Dr. Volkova has her Ph.D. In computer science from Johns Hopkins Center for Language and Speech Processing. She did her master's in computer science at Kansas State University, and we're honored to have her with us today. Dr. Svitlana Volkova, thank you so much for taking time out on your schedule to talk to us for a little bit.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's really great having you, Svitlana. I would love to start off, as we typically do on the show, by really handing you the floor for a little bit, just to talk a little bit more about you, because you have a clearly fascinating background. I'd love to hear just a little bit about the beginning, everything from where you grew up, when you first got interested in computer sciences in general, and then sort of this fascinating intersection, this three-way between computer science, social science, and linguistics. I think that'd be a great way to start things off, everybody.
Absolutely. So I'm originally from Ukraine. I came to the United States on a Fulbright program more than 13 years ago. I grew up in a small town called Bashtanka in the south of Ukraine, and when I was in the 8th or 9th grade, I was admitted to the Kiev Lyceum of Physics and Mathematics. It's still there. And this is the lyceum that is affiliated with the National Taras Shevchenko University in Kiev, the capital of Ukraine. So it was really, all the time, I was really into math and physics. And that's how it all started. And then after spending a few years in Kiev, I went back to Mykolaiv, to this back home, and I started learning computer science. So I was admitted to the Department of Computer Science at the Petro-Mohyla Black Sea State University. After that, I graduated with my bachelor's and my master's, and I started even teaching and started my PhD back in Ukraine. And after that, I just got admitted to a Fulbright program. So I passed all of the tests, and I came to Kansas. So Kansas was my first exposure to the United States. And then in Kansas, I was studying computer science and information sciences, and Kansas State University was the first place where I got interested in machine learning specifically. And after Kansas, I started my PhD at Johns Hopkins University at the Center for Language and Speech Processing. And at that point of time, I was pretty sure that I want to study people, language, human behavior, using computer science tools and techniques. So my exposure and my interest in machine learning and deep learning, actually, even at Hopkins, deep learning was pretty new back then. But I was always a math girl. I was always fascinated with mathematics and physics, and that's, I guess, that's my journey in like 2 minutes.
Excellent. Excellent. It's been a fascinating one. And, as I mentioned before the show, I spent time sort of diving into, a lot of your previous work, and I thought it'd be fun before we even get into PNNL, just to talk a little bit about some of these stops to really just show the breadth of everything that you've been involved in. And one of the, they're all equally fascinating, but an extremely fascinating place I started with was back in 2010. You're at Kansas State, and you're doing your thesis, which is entitled Entity Extraction, Animal Disease-Related Event Recognition and Classification from the Web. You're collaborating with the National Agricultural Biosecurity Center at the time. And while you're not focusing on something like COVID back then, you're focusing on this major issue of zoonosis, the ability of animals to pass things back and forth, which obviously have a major economic impact. But then there's also this other theme that we got into with the biodefense folks recently in terms of agroterrorism. A lot of issues there. You focused on something known as infectious disease informatics, looking at things like salmonella, foot and mouth disease, Rift Valley fever. Talk a little bit about, because I'm a life science, I love the life sciences, and I'm looking at all this amazing computational linguistics. You pulled together the life sciences back in 2010, a decade before this little zoonosis problem we have now. Walk us through what was happening back then, if you would.
Absolutely, it was very novel. And the novelty was coming from the open source data, right? So how can we leverage tons of open source data that is coming from news and different reports in many languages from many countries? Can we develop machine learning algorithms that can really efficiently and quickly process these huge amounts of data and make sense of this data to help with infectious disease monitoring and even anticipation, right? So if we're monitoring a specific region through open source data, can we be proactive and see that the outbreak is coming there, right? And this, as I'm telling you, kind of going back to 2010, it was pretty novel. Right now, we have very mature techniques and tools that have been developed and actually actively used by the government that are helping government officials to be proactive and to make effective decisions and to send help where the help is needed. But back then, it was very new and very exciting. So we were using natural language processing techniques and developing new techniques because nothing existed. So we built ontologies specifically for animal diseases. And we were developing information extraction algorithms to extract useful events and entities, right? Attributes that are affiliated with outbreaks, the number of casualties, right, or the affected regions. So very specific locations and people and organizations involved. So to present it to the person, to the analyst or decision maker, to help him or her to make a more optimal decision on the ground.
Very cool. Very cool. And continuing along sort of that journey, so I'll come a couple of years forward now to 2015. You're at Hopkins, you're working on your dissertation, and this is for your PhD entitled Predicting Demographics and Affect in Social Networks. You focus, okay, there's a lot of stuff going on in social media now in terms of all this data, not just data, but all sorts of other things that we don't normally think about in terms of information that we're putting out there, including, as you term, so-called latent attributes of the users. talk a little bit, because here your dissertation, you focus heavily on Twitter at the time, and exploring some of these, these fascinating, learnings about emotions, and all sorts of other things. And then subsequently to that, because I know there was some. I think it was a couple of years after that when there was your paper AGP Data Science. We were talking about specifically in that case, you're looking at health and affect over social media, and whether you can deduce certain things from in that particular case, the military community. We'll talk a little bit about, because I know for the Johns Hopkins that led into that next publication. But please say a few words about that if you would, too.
Absolutely. So back at Hopkins, I still continued looking into open data sources, and one type of open data source is social media. And back then, Twitter was very popular, and it was the best place for researchers to really move computational social science research to the next level, right? So it was the era when we were moving away a little bit from the lab experiments that are very small and focused and difficult to conduct and time consuming, to the and we were equipped with the ability to just crowdsource the population in a matter of hours, kind of, right? So I'm assuming that we have the right algorithms and the right models, right? But the ability to really understand the pulse of the nation, and I'm not even talking about anticipating, right? But the ability to really understand what people are concerned about, what bothers them, what emotions they express, how they do that, how people communicate, about what, right? In real time. This is very important. This is very important for national security. This is very important in general for studying human health and human behavior and making human life better, making our life better. So I wrote my thesis. Specifically in my thesis, I developed machine learning models to understand people's emotions and sentiments across many languages, as well as psychodemographic traits, right? So depending on the level of education or my age, I'm interested in specific topics, and I have specific concerns, and being able to predict these attributes and my reactions to certain events and things is very important. It's a very important tool for studying human behavior and understanding us better. And it's not only about companies that are doing it, right? So for example, when companies are providing like recommendations and sending you specific videos or specific advertisement, this is one aspect of it. So I wasn't focusing on it. I wasn't working for any company. I was doing my thesis. So my interest was pure research interest, where I just wanted to understand people better at scale, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking of millions of people, and I wanted to understand cultures better, right? So since I'm native Ukrainian, I really looked into like the Russian-speaking and Ukrainian-speaking populations, and looked into subtle differences. When back in 2014, when Crimea was annexed, I did a study and published on it, understanding people's sentiment, Crimean people's sentiment, and outside Crimea, and Ukrainian people's sentiment. And this is all possible through language, the way that we speak and what we speak about, and the way that we express our thoughts and perceptions is very revealing, very revealing. So we can really understand whether people are angry, or people are sad, or people are in support. And that's what was my thesis about, kind of looking across many cultures, very large populations, and trying to understand how they behave and what they are concerned about through language.
Excellent, really excellent. So you come to PNNL, Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, as I mentioned in the intro, part of the United States Department of Energy and under the Office of Science. And, we normally think about sort of Department of Energy, we think, of course, energy and Oak Ridge and Fermi and Los Alamos and things like that. And we're thinking about nuclear waste and fuels and so forth. But when you really dive into the organization, yours and many of these other labs, I mean, there's a lot more going on there than just energy, cybersecurity, informatics. There's a whole range of environmental, soil remediation, bioenergy. Could you take a few minutes and just give us sort of the 2023 landscape of what PNNL is all about, and a little bit about sort of where your directives come from in any given day? You're the chief scientist, but who calls you up and say, hey, Svitlana, we need you to look at this today versus that.
Svitlana is still lucky to choose her own problems that she looks at, but I can explain you how it works.
Awesome.
PNNL is, as you said, supported by the DOE Office of Science. However, we have many other sponsors, and I was lucky to lead 2 DARPA projects. One that was focusing on how information spreads through social media. And one was focusing on understanding cause and effect relationships in real world data. So causality, why something happened, can we explain it, right? What causes it? And primarily the sponsors at the directorate that I work for, the National Security Directorate, they include the Department of Defense, Department of Homeland Security, Department of Energy, and also like other sponsors, special programs, the intelligence community. So non-proliferation also is another big area of research for the National Security Directorate. So National Nuclear Security Administration specifically, their NIC-22 office has funded a lot of AI-related work. So it really depends on the directorate, and PNNL has 4 co-directorates. I represent the National Security Directorate, and that's how we align our research interests with the sponsor research interests, right? So, and I again represent the AI community. So all of the projects I have been working on at PNNL, and I have been with the lab for the last 7 years. And I joined the PNNL as soon as I graduated from Hopkins. And I started working on I think a few projects for DITRA back then. Mm-hmm. I think it's a very interesting project because they were a natural extension of my previous work, my thesis work, focusing on open source data, where we're looking into understanding military populations through social media and understanding their emotions and reactions in context of disease outbreaks, and specifically focusing on flu. And we wrote a very cool paper. We were the first people who used deep learning to anticipate flu outbreaks, specifically in military communities. So imagine you can collect public communications around military bases, and you can anticipate flu numbers, right? The number of people who will come to the clinic in that area only from social media. Obviously, if you have the actual clinic data, right? Historical data, you can predict trends better. But even what we demonstrated, and that's why that work was very influential, what we demonstrated was that if you only look at social media, and imagine you're not looking into the US, you're looking in some country, let's say Ukraine, where you don't have any historical data, right? By only looking into what people are chatting about on Twitter, which is crazy, but that's the case, you can anticipate the trend of flu outbreaks. So that's kind of one types of problems whereby I call them biosecurity, right? How can we understand human behavior and use open source data to predict flu outbreaks or COVID outbreaks recently too, right? So we also built a very interesting tool when COVID started. I think within a month after COVID started, we developed a tool called Watch Owl, where we looked into people's reactions and perceptions towards different non-pharmaceutical interventions that different governors started establishing, right? So we had social distancing and different types of closures, right? And different types of restrictions. And different governors in different states established them at a different time. And people started expressing reactions on Twitter. So by using the tools that we developed internally, we were able to demonstrate in real time that the states are in favor, the states are against, and the states expressing agreement or a questioning, right? So this is, I think, using models like machine learning and deep learning models to really help decision makers in real time to make informed decisions, whether it's about flu outbreaks or COVID outbreaks, infectious disease outbreaks. This is extremely important for national security and also for us. And you or I can also use these tools and leverage them to also get understanding what is happening in my state, right? Mm-hmm. How are people perceiving these new restrictions, right? So this kind of research, and but there is we're definitely doing beyond that. Recently, I really focused on non-proliferation. Mm-hmm. Can we really detect the potential signs of proliferating countries from open source data? So if you think about my team's research in general, I really rely on large amounts of unstructured, multilingual, multimodal, open source data. And it can be the scientific literature domain, or it can be the social media domain, right? Depending on the problem that you are trying to solve. So beyond, just to maybe wrap up at this point, and beyond biosecurity, beyond biosecurity that we discussed with flu and COVID and military populations, we also looked into non-proliferation and finally cognitive security and resilience. So we published a lot of papers and developed a lot of capabilities and tools to really understand misinformation and disinformation, and in general information operations campaigns.
Yeah, it's completely fascinating. Just for the listeners and the audience, the influenza paper, just in case you want to look at it, uncovering the relationships between military community health and affects expressed in social media. It's 2017 EJP Data Science. But as you bringing up nuclear security, I just want to ask, because I had a couple of months ago, Angela Sheffield from NNSA joined to talk about artificial intelligence in that context, and I was joking with her a little bit at the time. I have a 17-year-old son. He's here, in this house, and he loves all things nuclear science. And we were joking about, ultimately, if he types, how a nuclear bomb works, how you differentiate that ultimately from somebody doing it, some scary person over there somewhere. Talk a little bit, if you would, about some of these tools, because we talk about artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning a little bit in terms of various things on the show, in terms of drug development, in terms of farming practices and so forth. We touched on it in terms of the opioid epidemic. Talk a little bit about sort of where we are with artificial intelligence, and because for the layperson like me, I think of AI. I'm like, okay, I push a button here, and all the answers come out. But I think there's a lot more going on behind the scenes. Take us through a little bit of sort of what technologies excite you, what don't excite you as much, where sort of the AI space is really headed technologically.
In general, right? Not focusing on any domain. Okay. So as an AI expert, I'm sharing just my biased opinions. Over the last probably at least 15 years, we made a lot of breakthroughs in AI. So many things happened in natural language processing. So many things happens in computer vision right now. When we build AI systems to understand images, they are very smart and very different, and at this point even outperform for object detection, and for other tasks outperform human performance. For language, similarly, like the breakthroughs like BERT and like other models, like generative models, GPT-3, transform the field. We are looking into AI and language understanding. So if I think about myself in like 2010, when I started working with like information extraction, right now information extraction is done in a completely different way, at a different level. So a lot of breakthroughs happen, and you can actually see it in your real life, right? So for example, speech recognition, when you call your bank, the robot is much smarter than even a couple years ago, right? So all of this, like speech recognition, computer vision, and like natural language processing, we made huge improvements. And the industry is driving a lot of these discoveries and a lot of innovation in this space. Also, cloud is an important aspect of this research, right? Where we deploying and building models, the way that we develop models. We deploy them very fast. We deploy them in the cloud at scale, right? So for example, when Twitter releases another feature, it's deployed and validated very fast, like compared even to 2 years ago. So a lot of progress happened, but at the same time, wearing my national security hat, I'm talking about the mission. I'm thinking about the mission, and I'm thinking about applications in the field, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't think we're really there yet, especially in like mission critical spaces. A lot has to happen to AI in terms of verification and validation and evaluation before we can really say that we can put AI here to assist the analyst. I'm not even saying we can put AI in the field to replace the analyst, replace the human, not yet. So I strongly believe that AI is at that point where it's still human AI, right? So AI is much smarter doing specific things than the human, like processing tons of tweets and understanding millions and billions of papers or images, satellite images, right? So AI is good with this pattern recognition things and information extraction, knowledge extraction things, right? Like tasks. But the human is still this lag that is, or this part of this interaction that is making the decision, right? So I don't think we fully, and I don't think that this is the right thing to do right now to allow AI to make the decision. And we are not talking about the reasoning, right? So when we look and when we interact with the analytics, right, that is powered by AI, and analysts are doing it, they are the final parties that are making these decisions that affects like the downstream applications and the downstream users. So that's where I think AI is. We still have to do tons. We achieved a lot, so much automation, so much better accuracy. Definitely, we can perform tasks much faster, much better, with higher accuracy using modern AI, right? With this AI evolution. But I don't think I can really say that I can get out this like human out of the loop.
Yep.
Absolutely no. And I think actually that's how it should be, at least right now. Obviously, we want to automate, right? We want to move from automation to autonomy, right? So we want to build this autonomous vehicles, autonomous laboratories, right? Eventually, I don't know whether it's 10, 20 years, but we're getting there, absolutely getting there.
Got it. I appreciate you. I figured I need to ask you about that based on your expertise. So, but thank you for putting that out there. Talking a little about national security. We talked a little bit about sort of bio. You touched on the nuclear topic. I noticed another part of your purview at PNNL is deception detection and tackling in social and news media. And you were interviewed in the Washington Post. This was, I think it was last year. And it was talking about cryptocurrency scams. And I think it was the time when sort of Facebook was bringing out their cryptocurrency. And, you're quoted in here talking about, like, we think about sort of deception in sort of the political sphere, but financial deception, this can have a major impact as well on on a lot of things that go on. Talk a little bit about what you can tell about some of the things you're doing in the area of deception detection, related. And if you could talk about crypto, that'd be cool as well.
Absolutely. That's my team started working on this portfolio, and I call it Cognitive Security and Resilience Portfolio, back in 2016, and we wrote more than 30 papers in this area touching different aspects of this problem. So Even so, I think like 2015, 2016, when multidisciplinary teams of scientists started really looking deeper into the problem of disinformation and misinformation, including us. So we developed machine learning models that are, and we actually patented a lot of work there, models that can, from social media, detect whether this is a propaganda tweet or a clickbait tweet or a disinformation tweet, right? So predicting different types of deception. We also developed a lot of tools that help the end users, researchers or analysts to really understand the information environment. And by that, I mean measuring how information spreads, how fast, how far, how quickly, who is spreading it, right? So another aspect was this audience characterization, right? We really, which is in line with my thesis work, like with psychodemographics and effects and perceptions, sentiments, and reactions to certain events. And in addition to that, we used the existing and developed new causal discovery tools to really answer the question why. So basically, the idea is to look into the information domain like social media, Twitter, Reddit, YouTube, Telegram, you name a social platform, and really understand what spreads, how it spreads, who is reacting to it, how people are reacting, who is engaging with this information narratives. And a lot of this is powered by AI models, most of it. And then another aspect was why some narratives spread and some do not spread. Why some people are reacting to this disinformation and spreading it further and some people do not. What are their attributes? And then we can go even deeper, like when you think about characteristics and attributes of people, you can think about moral foundations, and our moral foundations are defined by our culture and our background. So it's very fascinating. Again, going back to studying people and studying cultures, and like overall, since 2016, we have developed a lot of tools that help us to really understand human behavior and tackle the problem as disinformation and misinformation spread, and even go beyond this reactive posture where, let's say, there is a misinformation campaign around COVID that is happening on Twitter, right? And we can measure it, we can see its effect, right? But it's post factum. What we can also do, we can be proactive and a little bit prescriptive, right? Can we anticipate this is happening? Given of what we already observed, can we really anticipate that this is gonna go this way and these people are gonna engage, right? So I think being able to anticipate and forecast the future is very important. It's very important for national security. It's very important in general to the humanity because we can, I don't want to say stop the spread, but I want to say mitigate the effect, right? And we know many cases when different types of campaigns, even going beyond disinformation and misinformation, like intimidation campaigns or polarization campaigns that are usually happening during the elections, right? They had tragic impact on some communities, right? I mean, it's not only, I mean, people are dying. This is very serious. And even if you think about what is happening in Ukraine right now, in my own country, the ability to be effective on the field with the weapon and the ability to be effective in the information space, I don't want to say that it's so equal, but I'm leaning towards saying that this is equal, right? So people are fighting on the ground, but people are also fighting in the information environment. And people are saying specific things, people are not saying specific things. And there are plenty of examples that I observe. And as an expert in this space, I see, this is suspicious. And I look into the source and then look into how it spreads, right? And I can immediately say that, I see that something is happening here, there are bots involved, right? So it's very important. We've made a lot of progress, as I said, as a whole community, not only national labs, and the government, but researchers, companies, right? So over this period of time, we collaborated with different companies and with different universities. We made a lot of progress in this space. So at this time, I think we developed AI-powered tools that can help us to understand the information environment and make it better, make it cleaner, make it better, and monitor the situation in real time effectively.
Speaking of those relationships, because a lot of the guests that I've had from different government institutes and so forth have these outreach sort of collaborative programs where they work with small innovators or university labs. What is the model for that at an organization like PNNL? If there was a promising scientist at a university or a startup company that has an interesting idea, how do they interface with you? How do they work with you? What's the process for something like that?
The lab is very collaborative, and my team is extremely collaborative, and I am very diverse with my collaborations. And I have a lot of friends and colleagues who are working for these companies like Meta and Twitter and Microsoft Research, Amazon. So the way that we usually do it, we give talks, we have like visits, right? And we have shared projects and we write papers together, right? If it's talking about the companies, because with the companies, it's this way, right? So the companies can't pay money to the government, but the way that we collaborate, we just collaborate on a shared research topic and we publish a paper together. With the universities, it's easier because we can subcontract the university and a student can come and do an internship. Mm-hmm. And I have actually leveraged that mechanism very successfully in my career, and I was able to work with brilliant students across many universities. Some local like UW, I think every project that I had a subcontract with the University of Washington, and I was lucky to work with the brilliant students from the University of Washington, but also other universities like Western Washington and the University of Notre Dame University, Carnegie Mellon University, and many more. So usually students come here and do the internship, and we call this program that is very competitive. It's called National Security Internship Program. Okay. And after the internship, students can continue doing this research through a subcontract if the project can support, and continue doing it and incorporate it into their thesis and come and do another internship. So I actually had 3 former students who I was able to hire as full-time, who were doing at least 2 internships with me over the course of the last 7 years, and they are PNNL scientists right now, which is a great, I mean, because they are brilliant people and they are brilliant early career researchers, and we got them through the internships. We got them excited. We got them excited about the technologies that we're building and about the problems that we're solving, because the problems that PNNL is solving that are related to national security are very different from what Twitter or Amazon or Microsoft Research is working on. So that's how we engage academia. But there are other mechanisms. We have shared workshops, and we also have definitely meet at conferences, and PNNL also organizes this AI research summit where we invite academia and industry. So many ways to collaborate and partner.
And speaking of those topics, just tell us a little bit while we have you. Are there things coming up, conferences that you're going to be presenting at, places that people listening to the show may meet you or listen to you? What's happening for the rest of 2022, 2023 beginning? Anything you can mention, please.
So I can tell you about one really cool event that is going to happen in Value in February of 23. And to give you a little bit of a background, there is a new emerging technology that is being developed right now and research called foundation models, foundational AI models. So we're talking about these models that are multi-purpose models, and instead of that are going beyond narrow AI. So basically, prior to foundation models, we have been developing, including my team, right? All of us, industry, academia, we have been developing much smaller models in terms of the number of parameters that focus on like one data set, one modality, one task, right? So if I want to do object recognition, I train my model to do object recognition. If I want to do, let's say, I'm not a computer vision person, but object tagging, right? So object recognition, just putting a box, but object tagging is naming the object. I build a separate model, right? Instead, what is happening with foundation models, it's a one model that is trained on extremely large amount of data without any labels in a self-supervised fashion. And this one single model, this one single brain can do many tasks at the same time: object detection, object recognition, image captioning, you name it, right? So many tasks. And these models, they started to transform the natural language processing field in 2018. And the models like BERT and GPT-3 that are driven primarily by industry appeared, and they completely changed the way that we do AI right now. So instead of developing like a single task narrow AI model, we are developing this multi-purpose brain, if you wish, right? Multi-purpose, similar to what we do, right? Because we see, we hear, we talk. That can be easily fine-tuned, right? And fine-tuned, I mean adapted to do many tasks, right? So you train one model on large data, but then you can easily adapt it to many tasks. And that's what the workshop is going to be about. So PNNL is one of the first labs that invested in foundational AI research in these foundation models that, as I said, have been primarily driven by industry. And we will host a workshop in collaboration with industry and collaboration with academia. And the workshop is supported by the National Nuclear Security Administration and the DOE Office of Science, specifically their OSCOR office, Advanced Science Research office. And we will talk about how to apply these models, the existing models developed by industry, to science and security applications, and what is missing, and what should be the research directions, and what are the research gaps in this foundational AI that are specifically important to science and security applications. So that's, I think, one of the exciting events that is going to happen in February. And in terms of 2022, I think just preparing NERPS is going to happen in 2022, actually in December, late November, early December, which is the top tier AI conference, NERPS, right? So that's a big event, and I hope I participate and attend and meet friends and colleagues, and again talk about collaboration. So these are two exciting things that are coming, at least.
Yeah, no, they sound extremely exciting. I'm glad you put that out there. So everybody that's listening and watching this episode will be able to see you and hear you, potentially meet you. So I mean, this is all really fascinating stuff, Svitlana. I mean, it's an amazing portfolio. I want to ask one. I mean, this is sort of the comical question of the show, but I just have to ask. I mean, before we were talking about, this sort of the purview line of forecasting the future using these diverse social media sources. Obviously, being involved in U.S. national security, you're involved in a lot of top secret stuff that you can't talk about. I'm sure you have to sign a lot of secrecy agreements. Are there certain things that you had to sign before you got involved in this that you're not allowed? I mean, obviously your team can't play the currency markets on the side or the stock markets or something while you're working on these super advanced global brain tools. Are there other things that you're not allowed to do, or anything? It just popped in my mind as I was thinking of sort of the knowledge that you potentially have in terms of predicting the future.
So I am a green card holder, so I still can get to top secret stuff, and all of the projects that my team is working on is unclassified, right? So all of my research is public and open, and we share models and data sets. I am in favor of open research, of an open research model, right? And very collaborative, right? So we try, when we develop our models and tools, we always release them publicly, unless we patent.
Gotcha.
But in terms of something like scary about the future, so when I'm talking about anticipation, I think everyone wants to know where the trap is going to be, right? Like you and I, like with the market, let's say, right? Like, oh, if I only knew that this was going to happen today, right?
Sure.
We're getting there, and if we're looking into the models, they also get the boundary of this predictive capacity, right? And there have been really good papers recently that actually mathematically explain this predictive power, right? So I can't really go beyond this much, right? And theoretically prove why not, right?
Right.
So there is some anticipation that is happening, but we still have to incorporate a lot of content or a lot of context, right? Because like the ability to predict the future, you really need to put many variables together, right? And sometimes these variables are not measurable. So anyway, what I'm trying to say is it's still difficult. I don't think it's that the future is that scary. And I am an optimist, and I'm an optimist and a realist. I also see building AI models every day. I see the power of it. I see the power of it on the mission and the effect on the mission, right? In some fields, as I said, it completely transformed the way that research is done.
Sure.
But at the same time, AI is not perfect, right? And we can talk about many examples of times when AI failed badly, right? And we cannot afford that in mission-critical applications. So I think another area of research that is important, and the community finally started looking into it a couple of years ago really seriously, is trusted and responsible AI, how we develop AI in a trusted and responsible way, right? And that's, I think, to answer your question about did you have to sign anything? I think like we all have to sign this moral, I don't know, where when we develop AI, we have to think about the consequences. And some conferences are even requiring to put a statement of potential adversaries that this or adversarial scenarios that this model can be used, because I believe, if I'm not mistaken, a deep fake paper was published at NERPS at this top-tier conference, right? And you see what's the effect of deep fakes that is happening, right? And what is the effect like nowadays? So that's important to make sure that we all, when we develop models, we are developing them responsibly.
Absolutely, absolutely. That topic of AI ethics and responsibility is, it seems to be prevalent across all these fields that we talk to. So I'm glad you brought that one up as well. I predict that this will be a very popular episode for us, because this is just such a as I said, your portfolio of responsibility is so fascinating, and you're such on this, I call the bleeding edge of everything that's happening in this domain. I really rooting you on not just in the development of these tools, but obviously in everything that you're doing to keep us safe and secure here in the United States. So really exciting work. For everybody that is going to be listening to this particular episode of our show across the various podcast networks or watching on the YouTube channel, again, you've been listening to Dr. Svitlana Volkova, Chief Scientist, Decision Intelligence and Analytics, National Security Directorate at Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, part of our U.S. Department of Energy. Svitlana, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come talk to us for a while about all these themes. Obviously, thank you for everything that you do in developing this and for our national security. And as we like to say on our show, thanks for helping to create a better tomorrow for many people out there via what you're doing. Really very promising and exciting work.
Thank you so much for having me. And I want to thank my team, because there are people behind this research that we are doing. And also thank you to the sponsors, right? People who really invest in this research because they think that that's important and that can change the future. So thank you.
That's great. Great seeing you.